Welcome to History Unraveled.
Yeah.
You know, we all think we know Napoleon, right?
Mm-hmm.
The brilliant military strategist, emperor of France.
That image, right?
Yeah, with the hand tucked in the waistcoat.
Classic.
But what if that's just the tip of the iceberg? What if there's so much more to his story? Something way more complex, way more surprising even.
Today, we're going deep, diving headfirst into the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. And let me tell you, this Wikipedia article we've got, it's a gold mine.
Oh, yeah.
It goes so far beyond those dry textbook accounts. We're not just going to hit the bullet points of dates and battles, oh no.
Forget that.
We're going to unpack the man himself from his, honestly, pretty unexpected beginnings to the seismic waves he made across Europe and the world.
I love that. We're all about peeling back the layers here, right? Unraveling those myths, that propaganda.
Absolutely.
Centuries of it built up around Napoleon. Where did he actually come from? How did he climb that ladder to the top? What was driving him? The scale of his ambition.
And don't forget the legacy.
Oh, the legacy. So full of contradictions.
It really is.
Get ready, everyone, because you're about to meet a Napoleon you probably haven't met before. This deep dive is all for you.
And this source, talk about scope. Born on an island that was barely French, Italian roots, officer in the Royal Army.
And bam, revolution.
Supporting it wholeheartedly.
Military genius, reshaping the map.
Legal reformer, influencing laws we still have today.
And a controversial figure, right? Napoleon's name still gets people riled up.
Oh, for sure. So much to uncover. Let's dive in.
All right, so we picture Napoleon as this ultimate Frenchman. But hang on a second, his story actually begins across the Mediterranean. It wasn't French aristocracy, was it?
Nope, not at all. Deep Italian roots going way back. His father's side, the Bonapartes.
Bonapartes, okay.
Minor nobility from Tuscany. They moved to Corsica back in the 16th century.
Gotcha.
And his mother's side, the Ramolinos, also of noble Italian descent, originally from Lombardy. So, emperor of the French he may have become, but his bloodline, different story altogether.
Fascinating. So, not born into the French elite. Where exactly did he enter the world?
Napoleon di Bonaparte, born in the family home, Ajaccio, Corsica, August 15, 1769.
Okay, so right there, interesting timing.
Oh, hugely. A future emperor, born on an island that had only just become French territory the year before.
Wow.
That whole context of Corsican identity, how it was woven into this relationship with France,
Yeah.
it's really key to understanding him.
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he wasn't an only child, was he? There were quite a few siblings running around, right?
You're right. Big family. Second of 8 surviving children. Can you imagine?
Faith.
There was Joseph, the older brother, then 6 younger siblings. Lucian, Elisa, Louis, Pauline, Caroline, and Jerome.
Wow.
And sadly, the source mentions 5 other children who didn't make it past infancy. Tough reality back then, unfortunately not uncommon.
No, sadly not. And you mentioned his name, Napoleone. But the spelling wasn't always consistent in his early life, was it? Like, language was a bit more flexible back then.
You got it. When you look back, you see all these variations popping up. Napoleon, Napoleon. Yeah. It just shows how things were, especially somewhere like Corsica with its own unique linguistic influences.
Makes sense. And circling back to that crucial date, 1769, Corsica had literally just been sold to France by Genoa. That must have shaped his identity growing up in that environment. It wasn't like being born in Paris.
Exactly. He was born into this culture with its own traditions and very recently a history of fighting for independence. That unique position, being Corsican but under French rule, it probably played a big part in who he became. Maybe even fueled his ambition to prove himself on that bigger French stage.
That's really interesting. And his father, Carlo, what a fascinating figure. Initially a supporter of Corsican independence. Then he sort of flips the script, becomes buddies with the French.
Yeah, a bit of a chameleon. At first, Carlo was all in on Pasquale Paoli, the leader of the Corsican independence movement. They were fighting Genoa, then the French. But then, 1769, the year Napoleon's born, the Corsicans lose at Pont Nouveau. Paoli goes into exile.
Okay.
And Carlo, he makes a pragmatic shift. Aligning with these new French rulers, he saw the opportunities it could bring.
Smart move. And it definitely opened doors for Napoleon, didn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. Carlo gets friendly with the French governor of Corsica, Charles Louis de Marbouf. This connection was gold.
Really?
Marbouf becomes Carlo's patron, even becomes Napoleon's godfather. And thanks to that pull, plus Carlo's new role representing Corsica to Louis XVI, Napoleon gets a royal bursary.
Like a scholarship.
Exactly, a ticket to military academy on the mainland.
So a bit of political maneuvering by Dad sets the stage for the future emperor.
You could say that.
And I just imagine this young boy, not even fully French, being shipped off to mainland France at 9 years old. Talk about culture shock.
January 1779, he leaves his island home, first stop, a religious school in Autun. Priority number 1, get his French up to par, since Corsican was his native tongue.
Right.
Imagine it, the sounds, the customs, everything completely different.
Total immersion. And it sounds like French remained a bit of a struggle for him. Never quite lost that accent, did he?
The source says even when he was fluent, he always spoke French with that distinct Corsican twang. And apparently his spelling, not his forte, let's just say.
Interesting.
It's a small detail, but it kind of highlights that outsider status, you know?
Yeah, I see that. Then he ends up at the military academy, Brienne-le-Château. And from what I've read, it wasn't exactly a warm welcome, was it?
Tough time, no question. He got bullied relentlessly.
Seriously.
It wasn't one thing, it was everything. His accent, his birthplace, even his height.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't a tall guy, was he?
Not really. That, his different mannerisms, his struggle with the language, it all made him a target. The other,
It's tough being a kid, fitting in. How did he cope with all that negativity?
He became pretty withdrawn, kind of melancholic.
Yeah.
Buried himself in his studies, reading especially.
I can see that.
And get this, one examiner actually noted his talent for math, history, geography. Even said he had the potential to be a top-notch sailor.
Huh, that's interesting.
Makes you wonder, what if he'd gone down that path?
A completely different trajectory.
For sure.
There's that story about him leading a snowball fight, like a military campaign. Is that a real glimpse into his leadership or just a good story?
Our source actually says we should take that with a grain of salt. The tale of him, organizing the younger students, beating the seniors in a snowball fight, it's supposed to show his early tactical genius.
Right.
But it really only got popular after he was already famous, so probably more myth than reality.
It's funny how these stories take hold, isn't it?
It really is. Speaks to the importance of digging deeper. Like, the source also mentions that in his later years at Brienne, Napoleon became quite vocal about Corsican nationalism. He even admired Pasquale Paoli, the very independence leader his father had initially supported.
Oh.
So even while being educated in France, that Corsican identity never really left him.
That's so interesting. Okay, so next step. École Militaire in Paris. Now we're getting into the big leagues, the training ground for serious military careers.
Exactly. September 1784, 15 years old. He enters the École Militaire in Paris. This is where they made artillery officers.
The elite.
And he continued to excel in mathematics, devoured books on every subject, geography, history, literature.
A real scholar.
But the languages, French and German, still tripped him up.
Always at Achilles' heel.
Seems so. And then, during his time in Paris, tragedy strikes. February 1785, Carlo, his father, passes away.
Oh, wow.
Huge impact on the family, financially, emotionally. Suddenly, a lot of responsibility falls on young Napoleon's shoulders. And it forces him to speed up his studies. He manages to cram a 2-year course into just 1 year.
Intense.
Talk about pressure and dedication.
Did he even pass?
Not only did he pass, he aced it. His examination was conducted by Pierre-Simon Laplace, no less, the renowned scientist.
Wow.
And guess what? First Corsican to graduate from the École Militaire.
That's incredible.
At 16, he's commissioned as an officer in the French Royal Army.
16. From bullied outsider to officer in the King's Army. What a journey. But of course, the world he was entering was about to explode.
Yeah.
The French Revolution was brewing.
Oh, absolutely. 1785, those ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity were bubbling under the surface. The old order was cracking. And this incredibly volatile environment, it's going to create unprecedented opportunities for someone like Napoleon.
And when the revolution did erupt in 1789, he didn't hesitate, did he? He sided with the revolution.
Our source is very clear. Napoleon was a supporter of the French Revolution right from the start in 1789. He saw it as a chance for change, actively promoted those ideals back in Corsica, where revolutionary sentiment was also gaining traction. This alignment with the revolution was key to his meteoric rise through the military ranks, which itself was undergoing massive transformation.
And that rise really took off after the siege of Toulon in 1793.
Turning point, right?
Toulon was huge. You had royalist forces backed by the British Navy. They'd taken the city. Napoleon, at this point a young artillery officer, he plays a vital role in the Republican counterattack.
Really?
His strategic thinking, how he used the artillery, brilliant. Forces the British and the Royalists to evacuate. This victory puts him on the map, catches the eye of the revolutionary leadership.
And I bet it got him promoted.
Oh yeah, big time. Brigadier General at just 24 years old.
That's a young for that kind of rank.
Unheard of, almost.
So just a couple of years later, we find him right in the heart of Paris, dealing with Royalist opposition. The 13 Vendémiaire.
Yeah.
Exactly. 1795 Paris, another Royalist uprising. Napoleon's called in to defend the National Convention. He uses artillery, famously, disperses the insurgents, crushes the rebellion,
Brutal but effective.
saved the government, and solidified his reputation as a commander who got things done, even if it meant being ruthless.
I can see there.
Promoted again, Major General this time, giving command of the Army of the Interior.
And then comes Italy, 1796. This is where he becomes a legend.
The Italian campaign, 1796 to 1797, spectacular doesn't even begin to describe it. You have this relatively unknown general taking over a demoralized, poorly equipped army. And what does he do? Through brilliant maneuvers, decisive battles, he absolutely dismantles the Austrian forces and their Italian allies. It was a whirlwind.
The scale of it is just mind-blowing. 150,000 prisoners captured, over 500 cannons seized. An entire army taken down.
It really was a devastating defeat for the Austrians and their allies. And it wasn't just about the numbers. Under Bonaparte, the French army fought 67 actions, won 18 pitched battles, all in less than a year. The speed, the tactics. Revolutionary. He combined infantry, cavalry, artillery in ways no one had seen before. His focus was on swift, decisive action, break the enemy's will.
And it wasn't just military glory either, was it? Italy became a cash cow for France under his command, basically bankrolled the war effort.
That's right. Bonaparte was very systematic. He extracted huge amounts of wealth from those conquered territories. We're talking 45 million French pounds, roughly. 12 million of that in precious metals and jewels. Not to mention hundreds of paintings and sculptures. Priceless art shipped back to France, enriching their museums, but a huge loss for Italy.
What a real power move.
And it definitely boosted his standing back in France. The Directory was happy with those full coffers.
So after Italy, you'd think he'd take a break, bask in the glory. But no, he sets his sights on Egypt in 1798. Completely different ballgame, strategically. What was the thinking there?
It was bold, definitely a bit unorthodox. Having seen how dominant the British Navy was, Bonaparte knew invading England directly was risky.
Makes sense?
So he comes up with this plan, seize Egypt, part of the Ottoman Empire at the time, but strategically vital because it's on the trade route to India.
Ah, cutting off Britain's access to those juicy colonies.
Exactly. Undermining their economic power and at the same time expanding French influence into a whole new region.
Not just about grabbing more land in Europe, then.
No. He even suggested to the Directory that after conquering Egypt, he could team up with Indian princes who hated the British, like Tipu Sultan.
Wow.
And then, bam, attack the British right in India. The Directory, they were looking for ways to challenge Britain, new trade routes. They cautiously approved the expedition.
And of course, we can't forget the Rosetta Stone.
What a find, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But the Egyptian campaign, it wasn't a clean victory, was it?
No, it wasn't. Some early wins, sure, but they ran into serious problems. Biggest one, the Battle of the Nile. The British Navy destroys the French fleet, cutting off Bonaparte's army. Pretty much. The Rosetta Stone was a huge cultural and historical win, but militarily, things were getting messy. But here's the thing. While all this is going on in Egypt, Bonaparte's got his ear to the ground back in France. He senses an opportunity. The Directory was becoming increasingly unpopular, unstable, ripe for the taking.
Which brings us to his dramatic return and the coup of 18 Brumaire. He basically ditches his army in Egypt to grab power in France. Talk about risky.
A gamble, for sure. Now, the Directory had actually sent orders for him to come back. Things were that bad. But those orders never got to him. Bonaparte makes the decision to leave Egypt. Kind of quietly, shall we say.
Tweaky?
By the time he gets back to Paris, October 1799, the military situation in France had actually improved a bit. But the Directory, a total mess, bankrupt, hated, they were hanging by a thread.
And he's still greeted as a hero.
Yeah.
After abandoning his post.
Crazy, right. But yes, many saw him as the strong man France needed, someone to bring back order. The Directory knew they were weak, knew Bonaparte had the public support. They couldn't touch him.
So he's back in Paris. The stage is set. How does this coup actually go down?
This was a meticulously planned operation. Bonaparte, working with guys like Talleyrand, key figures in the Council of 500, even his brother Lucien,
Family affair.
in a way. November 9th, 1799, 18th Brumaire in the revolutionary calendar, they launched the coup.
Big time.
Under the guise of this supposed Jacobin plot, they moved the legislative councils outside of Paris. Next day, Bonaparte shows up, first at the Council of Ancients, then the Council of 500.
And how'd that go?
Not well at first. The Council of 500 was hostile, but Lucien, he was president of the council, he basically saves Napoleon from being arrested. In the end, with troops loyal to Bonaparte backing them up, the Directory is dissolved. New government set up 3 consuls, Bonaparte, Sieyès, and Ducos.
From consul to first consul, it didn't take him long to climb to the top, did it?
Nope. The initial idea was shared power, but Bonaparte, with his popularity and political savvy, he takes charge, no question. The Constitution of Year 8th, adopted right after the coup, it created the consulate. But the first consul? He had all the real power. Sieyès and Ducos were basically sidelined.
Checkmate.
Pretty much.
And he doesn't stop there. As first consul, he secures a major military victory at Marengo in 1800.
Marengo, huge victory against the Austrians. Not only did it secure France's gains from the War of the Second Coalition, it further boosted his image. The brilliant military leader, the savior of France. His authority as first consul was rock solid.
Untouchable.
Pretty much. Gave him the political clout to push through even more reforms, solidify his grip.
And then, this one always gets me, he sells the Louisiana Territory to the U.S. in 1803. Seems so out of character for a guy obsessed with European dominance.
It was a pragmatic move, pure and simple. War with Britain was on the horizon, and Bonaparte knew France couldn't defend that vast territory across the Atlantic. Better to sell it to the young United States than risk it falling into British hands. Plus, he needed the money for those European wars. It was a strategic withdrawal.
I guess it shows he was thinking long-term, globally, not just about conquering land in Europe.
Exactly. And then, in 1804, he takes the ultimate step. Crowns himself Emperor of the French. Talk about a complete 180 from those revolutionary ideals.
How did that even happen?
It was a gradual thing. He craved stability, and there was this growing idea that a hereditary ruler was the best way to secure France's future.
Interesting.
Plus, there were assassination attempts against him, which played into this narrative of needing a strong, unchallenged leader.
I see.
They hold a plebiscite, a national vote, and the people overwhelmingly approve. May 1804, the First French Empire is proclaimed. The coronations in December, Notre Dame, the whole 9 yards.
The image of him crowning himself.
Iconic, right.
It's symbolic, breaking with the past, creating this new dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And now we enter the era everyone associates with Napoleon. The emperor, the endless wars, the conquests. It's not hard to see why he's still considered one of the greatest military minds in history. His tactics were game changers.
Oh, he was a true innovator. Speed, maneuverability, concentrating forces at decisive points. No one had done it like that before. He built on the reforms of the Revolution, created this incredibly effective fighting force. And his ability to inspire his troops, the meticulous planning, it all contributed to his victories. Even today, military academies study his strategies.
And it wasn't just the battlefield, the Napoleonic Code, that had a huge impact, legally, socially. We still see its influence today.
The Napoleonic Code, or the Civil Code of 1804, was a massive accomplishment. It codified those key principles of the French Revolution: equality before the law, religious tolerance, getting rid of feudal privileges, clear rules on property rights, family law. It spread throughout Europe with Napoleon's conquest, became a model for legal systems all over the world. It was the Revolution's legacy, exported under an imperial banner.
Quite ironic, in a way. And he implemented other changes too, right? Education, administration. He wasn't just about war and law.
He knew that a strong centralized state was key. He created a public education system, wanted an educated citizenry, reformed the administration, made it more efficient, centralized, with prefects running things locally.
And meritocracy, right?
Oh, he loved to talk about promoting people based on talent, not their birthright, at least in theory.
In theory, right. Because our source also makes it clear that there was a darker side to his rule. He brought about progress, yes, but he also clamped down on freedoms, became increasingly authoritarian.
You can't ignore that. He championed equality before the law, sure, but he also shut down dissent, brought back censorship, muzzled the press, representative government withered away, and his rule became more and more autocratic. Exiled or imprisoned anyone who challenged him, that enlightened reformer image. needs to be balanced with the image of the dictator.
And then there's the reinstatement of slavery in the French colonies. Seems like such a betrayal of everything the revolution stood for.
A massive step backward, morally abhorrent. The National Convention had abolished slavery in 1794, but Napoleon brought it back in 1802 in most colonies. Why? Economics? Pressure from colonial interests? A stain on his legacy, no question.
It's tough to reconcile those two sides.
It is.
The source calls his regime a dictatorship by plebiscite, a soft despotism. That seems to capture it well.
Yeah, he used those national votes, the plebiscites, to give his decisions a veneer of legitimacy, make it look like the people wanted it.
Smoke and mirrors.
In a way. But the real power, it was all his. Local and regional administration, all tightly controlled from Paris, and any hint of opposition was crushed swiftly and brutally. Those reforms, yeah, some were good, but they were implemented within this increasingly authoritarian framework.
And any resistance, whether from royalists or from regions wanting more autonomy, he dealt with it harshly. It wasn't all about popularity contests.
While he did have genuine popular support, especially early on, he never shied away from using force to maintain control. Royalist uprisings, regional revolts. He'd offer amnesty to those who surrendered, but for those who kept fighting, brutal repression. He knew power came from the barrel of a gun sometimes.
Then there was that brief period of peace with Britain, the Treaty of Amiens in 1802. Was it really peace or just a pause?
The Treaty of Amiens gave everyone a breather. Over a decade of war, people were exhausted. But those core tensions, the conflicting interests, they were still there, simmering under the surface. Britain wasn't keen on giving up all his wartime gains, and Napoleon's ambitions in Europe were still causing anxiety. It was a truce, not a true peace, just a pause before the storm.
And during that pause, he did some interesting things. The Concordat with the Pope, amnesty for exiled royalists, trying to heal the divisions in France after all that upheaval.
I think so. The Concordat of 1801 with Pope Pius VII, that was all about reconciling the Catholic Church with the French state after the chaos of the Revolution. It recognized Catholicism as the majority religion, but it also ensured the state had control over the church.
Clever.
And offering amnesty to those émigrés, the royalists who'd fled. That was another move to bring everyone together and those bitter divisions. His popularity shot up during this time. Peace and reconciliation, that was the vibe.
And that surge in popularity leads to him becoming consul for life.
May 1802, another plebiscite, landslide victory, consul for life, a huge step towards solidifying his power, creating a more permanent form of rule. The people clearly wanted stability, and they trusted him to deliver it.
But even amidst this peace and consolidation of power, there are those decisions that hint at darker things to come, like the reintroduction of slavery. It just doesn't square with that image of the enlightened leader.
A huge contradiction, absolutely. Pragmatism and self-interest often won out over those lofty ideals. Slavery came back because of economic pressures in the colonies and because Napoleon wanted to restore French colonial might. It's a dark stain on his record, no way around it.
And then that peace with Britain, it doesn't last. The Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
It feels like a kind of admission that war is inevitable.
I think you're right. Tensions with Britain were rising again, all these disputes over Malta, French influence in Europe. The Treaty of Amiens was falling apart. Selling Louisiana in 1803 was a strategic move, getting rid of a potential problem in North America, freeing up funds for the coming war.
Smart chess move.
Very much so. And in May 1803, Britain declares war. Europe's back in the thick of it.
And then this dramatic sequence, the transition to emperor, marked by that royalist plot and the execution of the Duke of Enghien. That sent shockwaves through Europe, didn't it? It felt like Napoleon was crossing a line.
The Duke of Enghien, 1804. That was a turning point. Napoleon claimed he was involved in a royalist plot, but he was abducted from neutral territory, executed without a proper trial. It was condemned across Europe, seen as a blatant violation of international law, a brutal display of power. A real escalation. Alienated a lot of people, especially the European monarchies. It gave them ammo to use against Napoleon.
And it's almost cynical, isn't it? His supporters used this brutal act to argue for a hereditary empire, saying it would bring stability and prevent future plots.
Textbook example of using a crisis to advance a political agenda. The argument was, a hereditary empire means a clear line of succession, no more power vacuums, no more plots. This narrative, plus Napoleon's popularity, the public's desire for order, it all paved the way for the empire.
So from a murdered duke to emperor, that's dark.
Very.
And then the coronation at Notre Dame, the self-crowning. What a statement.
December 1804, the coronation. A meticulously staged spectacle, all about legitimizing his imperial rule. The Pope was there, adding that religious authority.
Blessing of the church.
Exactly, but Napoleon taking the crown, placing it on his own head, then crowning Josephine. It was a deliberate power move.
Showing who's really in charge.
Exactly. He was saying his authority came from him, from the French nation, not from God or the Pope. A bold break with tradition.
The Napoleonic Wars dominate the years that follow, reshaping the map of Europe. We could spend hours talking about every battle.
We could, couldn't we?
But some key points from the source. The failed plan to invade England. The British Navy, always a thorn in his side.
Always.
Then those incredible victories against Austria and Prussia, and of course the Peninsular War in Spain, a long, bloody slog. He was constantly at war.
It was relentless. Napoleon was a master strategist on land, but he couldn't overcome British naval supremacy. And that Peninsular War, a costly drain on resources. It became a quagmire, foreshadowing the eventual decline of his empire.
And he even tried to forge alliances in the Middle East, didn't he? Putting pressure on Britain and Russia from all sides. Global chess game.
He really did have a grand vision, one that went far beyond Europe. He saw those alliances with the Ottomans, with Persia, as a way to weaken British influence in India. But their fragile alliances didn't really pan out the way he hoped. Still, it shows how ambitious he was, willing to try anything to take down his rivals.
And then comes Russia, 1812. That's where the wheels start to come off, right?
The Russian campaign.
Yeah.
A colossal miscalculation. A mix of factors drove him to it, but it was a disaster. He amasses this huge army, the Grande Armée, hundreds of thousands of troops from all across his empire. The invasion starts well enough, but then the Russians start retreating, burning everything as they go, scorched earth tactics.
Brutal.
Denies Napoleon the supplies he needs. And then winter hits. The retreat from Moscow, devastating. The cold, the hunger, the constant attacks. His army was shattered, never really recovered.
The casualties on both sides. Horrifying. The human cost of his ambition.
Hundreds of thousands dead on the Russian side, and the total death toll from both sides could be as high as 1 million. An immense tragedy, a testament to the brutality of war and the consequences of Napoleon's drive.
It's a sobering thought. And this loss in Russia emboldens his enemies, leads to the War of the Sixth Coalition. He's on the back foot now.
The tide had turned. Prussia, Austria, they'd been forced into alliances with France, but after Russia, they saw an opportunity. They joined with Russia and Britain to form the Sixth Coalition. Napoleon won some early battles, but he was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. The Battle of Leipzig in 1813, the Battle of Nations, that was the decisive defeat. French control over Europe crumbled.
And then the unthinkable. France itself is invaded. This leads to his first abdication, exile to Elba in 1814. What a fall from grace.
It was a stunning reversal of fortune. Allied armies marching to Paris, Napoleon facing overwhelming odds, some of his marshals even switching sides. He had no choice.
So he gives up the throne.
He abdicates. The Treaty of Fontainebleau strips him of his title, and off he goes to Elba.
And he tries to kill himself, right?
Yeah.
After the abdication.
It's true. The source says he took poison he'd been carrying since the retreat from Moscow. Deep despair.
Wow.
Luckily for him, the poison had lost its potency. He survived. But it shows how deeply his downfall affected him.
A small mercy, I suppose.
In a way.
But Elba wasn't the end, was it? The 100 days, the escape, the return to France. It's like something out of a movie.
February 1815, he slips off Elba with a handful of loyal men, lands back in France. He was betting that the French people, who weren't happy with the restored Bourbon monarchy, would welcome him back.
And they did.
They did. As he marched towards Paris, more and more people joined him. Even some of the troops sent to arrest him switched sides. Louis VIII fled, and Napoleon was back in power.
Incredible.
A short-lived triumph, though. The 100 Days. He probably hoped to regain his empire, or at least get a better deal from the other European powers.
But it all came crashing down at Waterloo.
Waterloo, June 1815, the end of the road. The British, led by the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussians, under Blücher, they crushed his army. The final nail in the coffin. He abdicated again shortly after.
No coming back from that.
No. And this time, no cushy exile. They send him to St. Helena, this remote, heavily guarded island in the South Atlantic, a world away from the power he once held.
From emperor to prisoner.
St. Helena was a harsh place, nothing like Elba, remote, windswept, thousands of miles from Europe. The British chose it specifically to make sure he couldn't escape. October 1815, he arrives under constant guard.
His life there sounds pretty grim.
Grim's an understatement. He was stuck in Longwood House, damp, unhealthy, constantly complained about his treatment at the hands of the British governor, Hudson Lowe, who he saw as his jailer. He tried to hold on to some semblance of his imperial dignity, but his health went downhill.
And yet, even stuck on this remote island, he was still a figure of controversy back in Europe, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. News about his conditions on St. Helena got back.